I do think that there is a lot of destigmatizing that needs to be done around these symptoms, and that embodiment is good for like anybody. You know what I mean? It's like a human
Yeah.
experience that like
Yeah.
connecting to how we're feeling on the inside gives us insight and information and helps us act in a way that it can be most kind to ourselves in the future, regardless of, any kind of disorder or diagnosis that, somebody might have.
Today, I'm pleased to introduce to you my special guest, Dr. Mark Hardison. His career has been focused on clinical intervention research in occupational therapy that highlights the use of mindfulness meditation and other wellness interventions as complements to traditional settings. His current project, funded by the American Occupational Therapy Foundation, is to develop and implement a restorative, community-based intervention for individuals who have disordered eating. Dr. Hardison uses a mixed methods approach to his work that balances quantitative improvements in well-being with qualitative experiences of individuals receiving those interventions. He has various publications on these topics in national and international occupational therapy journals, presentations at the regional, national, and international level. He also has a book chapter on eating disorders in the third edition of Brown, Stoffel, and Muniz's Occupational Therapy in Mental Health textbook. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Dr. Mark Hardison. Hi, Mark. It's so good to have you here with us today.
Hey, Christina, glad to be here.
I'm wondering if you could just tell us in your own words just a little bit about who you are and what got you interested in the connection between mind and body.
Sure. So I'm somebody who I majored in psychology in undergrad and kind of didn't know where that was going to take me. I ended up working at a group home for adults with serious mental illnesses. And in that group home, we did a lot of kind of like daily tasks with those folks. I mean, as far as self-management and cooking and advocacy with doctors and cleaning your room and all of those kind of, everyday things. And that little did I know it at the time, but that was kind of the precursor for occupational therapy for me, which is kind of a lot of what OT is focused on, which is kind of function and daily tasks and self-care as the main kind of direction for therapy. Then I went to go get my clinical degree in occupational therapy to become an occupational therapist. At the same time, OT also works a lot on physical rehabilitation as far as, the functioning of the upper extremities and the ability to use your hands and things like this. And so I think my interest in blending the kind of mental health side of things with the more physical health side of things came from this marriage of my interest in psychology, my interest in positive psychology or motivational theory that came from my undergrad, and then blending it with more of an OT perspective, which often focuses on things that are like physical functioning as a precursor for occupations or, kind of self-care tasks.
I noticed some of the publications that that you've published in the past, and it's like the mindfulness plus the use of the hands and stuff like that. When you
Yeah.
first brought that up to the people, your graduate supervisors or whatnot, were they kind of like, "Oh, this is kind of out there"? Were they surprised, or were they totally on board? Like, what was that sort of reaction?
I I get some pretty polarizing responses, I think, because for many people this is a strange idea that you would
Hmm.
add something like mindfulness meditation to hand therapy intervention, which is very biomechanical. It's like stretching and strengthening and wound management and scar
Yeah.
management and all those
Yeah.
kinds of things. And the idea of trying to do something that was more mental health focused in that situation, I think can be pretty challenging, especially if you've been in the field for a long time. You do things a certain kind of way. Fortunately, my mentor at the time when I joined the doctoral program at USC, he was already in the process of doing a project that was blending some mind body techniques in that setting, and so it was kind of just a stroke of luck, I guess, that I joined his lab at the same time. And at the time, I wasn't as aware of mindfulness meditation, but that was kind of the first step. Was this project that was already going on, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a really great way to blend my interests. And I do think that either people really get it or they really struggle with it. In the hand therapy community, there can be some pushback, and that's okay. But I also feel really strongly that in all settings in occupational therapy, even the most biomechanical ones like hand therapy, that our patients are having some kind of mental health experience with any kind of physical injury. And that was really my introduction to this type of clinical intervention research in OT that eventually became the ROADE program later.
Well, thank you so much. That's super interesting. And I love that was a beautiful segue. So, can you tell us about the ROADE program?
Sure. Yeah. So, like I mentioned, a lot of my research in my doctoral work was in the setting of hand therapy, but it was building skills to be a really good clinical researcher and learning how to implement with best practices mindfulness based interventions. But then once I, got a job as a professor and could kind of shift to a different area, I do think that, perhaps there's a little bit of an easier connection sometimes for these mindfulness interventions in the area of mental health within occupational therapy. But nonetheless, I mean, I think I still come to any clinical situation trying to understand the whole person. So, what's going on for them mental health wise, physically, but also kind of socially and spiritually are elements of well-being. Just thinking like biopsychosocial model basically within those
Hmm.
settings. So then when I became faculty at University of New Mexico, there was a faculty member there already who was kind of running this free program that was a small program at the time for community-based intervention for eating disorder. It was a passion project for this person, and I ended up kind of aligning and working together with them to build the ROADE program, kind of using their clinical expertise, their understanding of eating disorder, and then my understanding of clinical research and implementation of mindfulness-based interventions to end up getting a grant through the American OT Foundation that ended up funding our work for feasibility studies. So, all of it is still kind of early days as far as developing the intervention. But I think it's very exciting. And, we've had some, I think, really promising results, even preliminarily for a small project getting started, hopefully moving towards bigger things.
Yeah, I think that's just so cool. I mentioned to you that my doctoral dissertation also worked with eating disorder, but had a lens that was both, it was a marriage of
Hmm.
psychology and occupational therapy. So when I found out about the ROADE program, I was so excited to talk to you because I think that the sort of the idea of embodiment within the field of occupational therapy and working with certain concepts but from a different, from an OT lens, I think is like people don't recognize how these two fields actually can really go really well together.
I think like it's embodiment is such a fascinating topic, and it's something that in OT, we talk about a little bit. There's this big theory in OT called doing, being, and becoming, which kind of
Mhm.
touches on embodiment and this idea of doing the things that are meaningful for us is this kind of process of becoming, and it kind of involves
Mhm.
embodiment. But it isn't necessarily like at the center of a lot of the typical practice areas for OT.
Right.
And I think
Right.
it's like so great to be able to try to, I don't know, bolster this way of
Yeah.
thinking within our practice. And it fits so well with mindfulness too, because like
Does.
even starting back in my doctoral dissertation days, where it was mostly about kind of reducing pain, perhaps, as one of the
Hmm.
main outcomes for the mindfulness interventions. I
Hmm.
do think that like so many people who have a health condition or some kind of diagnosis, and that it's there's this process of kind of disconnecting with the self to kind of run away from it because it can be really
Right.
scary, right? And I think that
Yeah.
can be pretty universal human experience with illness and disability.
Right.
For people that are in pain, it's maybe our first intuition is to run away from it or to try to avoid it or to not aggravate it or whatever. And similar to eating disorder symptoms, maybe really big emotions that come up, or really big judgments that we might have about ourselves or things like
Hmm.
this, where we try to, and there's this process of kind of running away from those things psychologically. And embodiment really, is cueing us to instead lean in and kind of explore with curiosity and openness, what it means to be in pain in certain ways, or what it means to experience an uncomfortable emotion of some kind. And that I think can be really powerful and help move people towards healing.
Absolutely. I love that so much. So the ROADE program is really built around it seems to me body connection. I know that's one of the big, principles.
Absolutely.
And so can you walk us through what that actually looks like. Maybe just macroscopically, like the sessions in general, but then also just like what does a particular session, what might that look like when you guys are together in the room?
Yeah, absolutely. So the ROADE program tries to balance between flexibility and meeting individual people's needs while also having enough structure to be kind of reproducible as an
Mm-hmm.
intervention.
Uh-huh.
And so there are different kind of parts of the hour-long sessions that happen that either are flexible or are a little more structured. And so and it's 8 weeks, twice a week for an hour each session. And so there's always a check-in that happens as far as seeing how, progress has been going for the week or kind of what's been going on in that person's life as it relates to their eating disorder symptoms or any other kind of thing going on with them. Um, and then there's a structured activity that's around embodiment. So either a yoga activity or a mindfulness activity or a self-massage activity that is a little more structured and kind of prescribed that, certain, weeks have certain of those activities that are prepared that we do with everybody. And then hopefully with that kind of, 20 to 30 minute activity, that helps people feel a little bit more centered and also kind of connect with how they're feeling emotionally, psychologically. And then we're able to kind of move into the more flexible part of the intervention, which is something I would call occupational orchestration, where we're really kind of doing problem solving in real time around the things that people need to do in their daily life to live it in a meaningful way. So if that's going to school or going to work or managing social relationships or anything else that really comes up for somebody, the things that people do that are meaningful every day, the eating disorder often gets in the way. And so it's this process of problem solving, troubleshooting around problems, helping reduce symptoms, improve coping mechanisms, trying to re-engage with the things that are meaningful in whatever way is possible. That's kind of the balance, right? It's these embodiment activities like mindfulness or yoga, and then occupational orchestration, where we're kind of problem solving around daily life and symptomology. And that's the gist of what we do in those sessions.
That sounds really cool. And that occupational orchestration is every single session at like
Yes.
towards the end of every single session. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the embodiment practices, you said, meditation, yoga, self-massage. Is there a certain prescribed, like an order that came with certain logic, like, oh, we're going to do meditation at the beginning of the program because of some reason, or is it just like just kind of how did you choose which embodiment session goes where?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And actually, that's part of the aims of the study is to figure out what works the best. So,
Okay.
I picked some things that in my experience with previous research on mindfulness, thought would be appropriate for this setting, this population, this set
Hmm.
of kind of symptoms, maybe. But we're also kind of tracking what do the participants in the study seem to think works the best. What's their perspective? There's a qualitative element that happens at the end of the study where we do ask those types of
That's
questions. And
cool.
so,
Yeah.
like, I made a very educated guess, but I'm also collecting feedback on kind of what
Okay.
works for people. But I guess I'll tell you my theory, which is
Yeah.
for learning meditation, in my opinion, I think it's easiest to start with guiding a body scan because this can be very relaxing. I mean, for most people, this is a very relaxing, exercise to do. Basically, like guiding the participants to become intentionally and non-judgmentally aware of how different parts of their body are feeling sequentially. So you start with the feet,
Hmm.
you move up the legs, up the torso, up the arms, up the neck, the face. And so you're just kind of syncing up breathing with this intentional awareness. And for most people, this is very relaxing, and it's actually, it's a pretty sure bet that this is going to go well, I think, for most people. And of course, I would never push somebody through an activity if they're really struggling with it. And obviously, some people struggle with awareness around certain parts of the body. So we're just gentle with that and kind of moving through it or skipping parts, or I encourage them to, engage with whatever part of the activity that they're feeling most comfortable with. But in general, this is pretty gentle. Then we move more perhaps towards some of the more challenging things over time, where by the third session of the meditation, it's guiding the participants to look towards some area of discomfort, either the physical or emotional, that is going on for them right now, and then away to another area of the body, and kind of practicing focusing towards and away from challenges as kind of a coping strategy, trying to help
Hmm.
the participants understand that if there is something that's uncomfortable going on for them, it's not their whole experience. And just kind of contextualizing that, like, I think we can get very honed in on what we hate feeling, or what we don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to kind of recontextualize that with the broader human experience of all the other things that are going on as well. Not making, light of it, not saying that it should go away, but just trying to get practice with the attention to be able to focus on it if we want to, and to be able to focus away if we want to.
Interoception keeps coming up in your work. Can you talk about what interoception is? Why does it matter in eating disorder recovery and how that is integrated into the ROADE program?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very important. And I know that you also have some thoughts about this that can maybe contribute. But I think, in the ROADE program, in occupational therapy in general, one of the things that we evaluate is the sensory system, and interoception being one of the senses. So, the idea of understanding what it feels like inside your body, as far as your level of energy, how tired you are, if you're hungry, kind of the difference between, arousal and stress versus rest and digest, those types of things. This can be a very subtle thing to feel for people, especially if they're not looking for it. And I do think that for many people that have eating disorder, they become disconnected with their sense of interoception, because
Mhm.
those kind of subtle hunger cues are taken over by anxiety or something like this,
Mhm.
or ignored, or whatever the case is, or people that are very dysregulated aren't able to connect with their sense of hunger or fullness and things like that.
Mhm.
And so, part of this embodiment practices that we do with the meditation and the yoga is hoping to cue people to tune into the more kind of subtle and quiet feelings that might be happening in their body. And so sometimes that's earlier warning signs when there are big emotional things that are happening, before it becomes some kind of like large crisis that might trigger some kind of symptomology with the eating disorder. Or maybe it's just with kindness, being willing to reconnect with how their body's feeling when it is really intense, and maybe somebody is in a binge cycle or a purge cycle or something like this. And the I guess how do I say, the intuition is saying to focus away from how the body's feeling because it's so uncomfortable. But I think, one step in kind of reconciling this is learning to, with compassion, be in your body in those moments and understand what's going on, even if you're not changing any kind of behavior, just being gentle with yourself before, during, and after some kind of large symptomology like a binge or a purge. I think can be one step on the road to healing. So there's kind of a lot there that's going on with reconnecting with embodiment.
Mhm.
And it's a long process. It's a slow process. I think it's something that we perhaps start with people in those 8 weeks, twice a week, but I don't think it's enough. Just that short amount of time. I think it's something that people will need to continue to explore in different ways in their life. And if that's, they love the yoga, so they keep doing that, or they love the mindfulness, they keep doing that, or they, pick up journaling and start journaling, but just kind of this, intentional cueing inwards to understand ourselves better.
There's so much richness there. It's like, oh, so many things to respond to. Well, first of all, just thank you for saying that it can take a long time, and that even doing 16 hours in 8 weeks, which is a lot, and that even
Yeah.
doing that, there could still be so much more work to do for any of us
Oh, yeah.
being human in this meat suit. It's like, it's not
Totally.
like, oh, I'm embodied and now I'm done.
No.
It's like it's a continual practice of checking in with ourselves and making adjustments and turning towards ourselves with ideally that kindness and the curiosity and the compassion. So thank you so much for just saying, like, the reminder that this is a long journey. And I love the idea in the ROAD program how you are focusing on that bodily reconnection and improving the interoceptive awareness. But even though I think that there is validity for certain practices to address like just attention on hunger and fullness signals, right? But you
Mhm.
guys aren't necessarily focusing on that. You're working on the interoceptive awareness through sort of like these side paths, through breath, through doing gentle movement,
Yeah.
through meditation. And so you're working on these skills that can be applied to certain eating disorder symptomology, but you're doing it in a sort of a different way that may feel a bit more approachable, and yeah, people might feel a little bit more open to it.
I certainly hope so. I do think that there is a lot of destigmatizing that needs to be done around these symptoms, and that embodiment is good for like anybody. You know what I mean? It's like a human
Yeah,
experience that, like,
yeah.
connecting to how we're feeling on the inside gives us insight and information and helps us act in a way that it can be most kind to ourselves in the future, regardless of, any kind of disorder or diagnosis that, somebody might have. And so I do think that practicing it within the context of kind of more of like the quote unquote eating symptoms um, uh, is good, but also just in general, kind of promoting the sense of gentleness with the self around what we're feeling and what our desires are and what our emotions are, and being able to exist in our bodies more fully, I think can be really powerful, regardless of, whether or not it's to do with eating disorder.
Right, absolutely. Such a good message. So, if there is someone who's in a non-OT setting, kind of in this
Mhm.
eating disorder realm, like it's a registered dietitian or it's like
Sure.
a mental health therapist or a health coach, what would you want them to understand about what occupational therapy brings to the space that may be complementary that they're not offering? Because I think a lot of people are not aware that OTs could definitely
Sure.
be part of an interdisciplinary team or just can bring something different. What would you want them to know about OT and how this could be different and complementary to what they may be offering?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to start out my answer by saying that I do feel like OT is complementary to mental health counseling services. It's not in any way meant to compete with it. It's,
Hmm.
the focus for occupational therapy is always on function. So, whether it's in a hospital or an outpatient clinic or a community session or a group or anything, the focus is towards these meaningful activities that people do in their daily life, and either reducing symptoms, improving capacities, or working around symptoms to be able to engage in those things. And so I guess it can sound perhaps a little bit similar to the way that a mental health counseling session works, but I promise you there's some very stark differences. This has been debated for many years. But the idea is that the emotional intensity of the relationship is different and less so than in a mental health counseling session. I mean, it's more focused on pragmatic things around, helping people re-engage with functional things, like work or school or self-care or social things. The benefit of occupational therapy in this setting is that it's very pragmatic. It can be something that guides our patients, participants, clients, whatever the setting might be, to use the skills from mental health counseling that people are learning to do problem solving around daily life. And also, I hope that I'm guiding the participants in the study to what we would call in OT, engage in a new occupation of self-care. So giving people these self-care occupations that can become very precious to them in the way that they help manage their own symptoms. So yeah, I would say the strength of OT is definitely in our focus on function and kind of the pragmatics.
What's interesting to me is I feel like a lot of the education the occupational therapies get, not a
Mm,
lot of it, but a certain part of the education they receive that's distinct from, for example, mental health counselors is in-depth study of like sensory systems, sensory
yeah.
integration theory, and that sort of thing, which is really unique to occupational therapy. And
Mhm.
I see that reflected in different aspects of certain occupational therapists. For example, in the ROADE program, there
Mhm.
is a lot of attention to the senses. And for example, you mentioned that the yoga was sensory enhanced yoga, which
Mhm.
is very much focused on specific inputs to the nervous system using things like deep pressure touch and slow rhythmic vestibular input and so forth. And these are things that occupational therapists have, gotten training in specifically, and that I think other fields have not, unless you're
Mm.
looking at, I know a little bit about it because I've looked into occupational therapy, but I certainly didn't learn about it from psychology, which is my background. And so I think that's something that's really unique that occupational therapists they can contribute.
Yeah, absolutely. The I think, maybe to add to your point too, this kind of combining the more body focused interventions and the mental health focused ones with this idea of sensation in the middle, kind of being something that OT adds. No, that's a great answer. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Road right now, tell us where it's at. I believe it's still in the feasibility phase. So,
Yeah.
what are sort of your next goals, your hopes? Like, what's coming?
Absolutely. Yeah, so we completed our feasibility research project, which again is very small, it's sample size. And the goal for any feasibility study is more to understand, does it make sense to do this intervention? Do the participants feel like it's helpful? What are some preliminary changes we're noticing for the outcomes we're looking at? But it's not focused on external validity or trying to, prove efficacy at this point. We're
Mm,
just kind of working out the kind of pragmatics of how can we run this study and does it seem to be working? And I'm happy to report that, we do have very strong preliminary results for this type of study, and it does seem like we're able to, at least in this small group of people, able to reduce their complaints of different symptoms of eating disorder and the amount that that is burdensome to them in daily life, and also reducing anxiety and improving health-related quality of life are the outcomes for our study. So from this perspective, the feasibility study was very successful. And the next step for me is kind of building up and moving forwards, trying to collect more data towards something that's more efficacy focused. So in the short term, my hope is to be able to build the ROADE program here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I reside, and also adding Las Vegas, Nevada as a new location because that is where my campus is located for the university that I work at, and just running the program, using the lessons that we learned for this, running it for free, and hopefully helping some people and building enough evidence to support future funding for it, to build towards an efficacy trial. So yeah, still very preliminary. It's really hard when you don't have a control group, right? And it's a small sample size. You can't really say, or you have to be very cautious about saying, that your intervention works or not. I mean, what we see is
right.
that it's a very good signs that it probably does and will, if we do it, and we're definitely wanting to move forward and make it bigger and recruit more people and run it and help some people. So that's the idea.
I love that. Is it if people are located in Albuquerque, New Mexico, or Las Vegas, would it make sense to invite them to contact you?
Yeah,
Or
absolutely. Please. Yeah.
okay.
You can reach me over
And
email.
okay,
100%.
if anyone listening, I don't know when this is going to come out and where, but
Mhm.
probably you're still going to be, I know that
Yeah.
research takes a long time. So if anyone listening is in those areas and is interested, or they know someone who's interested who wants some help, please contact Mark. Mark, let them know how to reach you.
Yeah, so you can reach me at my university email, which is my first initial and last name, mhardison@hpu.edu.
Great. Is there any place else, any last messages that you want to share, or any place else you want to direct people?
No, I just really appreciate the opportunity to be on the program with you. I love, kind of hearing about your perspective from your doctoral work, and it's been so fun chatting with you.